Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Reacher, Season 2, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, immediately picking up in the aftermath of last episode, and the squad leaves Swan's place and confront the one of the people that was following them. Turns out it's Dominic's character, who turns out to be an NYPD cop. So that was interesting. And after Reacher, I love he kicked the car, set off the airbag, and then proceeded to beat the other living crap out of him. Which I love that both O'Donnell and Neely will not let him live that down. Understandably, it's like we kind of have to bail out of New York, or at least kind of hide you out, because in the moment he's conscious again, you're screwed. So it turns out he was the cop investigating Franz's death, and so he must have been keeping an eye on Neely, because the fact is they were suggesting because her number came up more frequently in Franz's numbers. It's like, right, you're the last person to talk to him. So the moment she was paying to have someone picked up at the airport, that's when Reacher came into play. It's like, okay, so let's keep an eye on her and see what she knows and what they're doing. So obviously it's complete. So he's an NYPD detective. We know the other person that's following them is not the dude that works for Robert Patrick's character. So still don't fully know his deal until later on in the episode, where we find out that he is there to kill them. Now, because I think this speaks volumes about he's not the one that's killed them. He seems separate from whoever's responsible for killing them, potentially because he told Home Dude, Robert Patrick's character told Home Dude to wait till they're all together and kill them. Meaning, jumping ahead to the end of the episode, we find out Orozco and Sanchez are dead. But Robert Patrick, because he at that time the four of them were together. We'll get to Dixon soon enough, but she had joined up with him, so he was like, all right, they're going to meet up with the others that are still alive. So he was like, right, but probably assumed they didn't meet up with Swan, so Swan's dead. So most likely meeting up with at least the other two members are alive. So the whole point was to wait for all of them to be gathered to kill them. So because if that was the case, why not pick a better time to kill them since all four of them are already together? So he had no idea that Sanchez and Orozco were dead. So it has nothing to do with it. He still wants them dead for whatever reason. So whatever that might be more specifically 110, the 110th, specific. But maybe who's killing them off isn't related. It's still unclear. Once again, we're only episode 2, so still so much we don't know. But yeah, they decide to go down to Atlantic City because they were going to look for Sanchez and Orozco, and they end up running into Dixon as they're trying to get a new ride, because if they order one that's going to leave too much of a paper trail, it's going to draw too much attention. They also can't steal a car because that's going to add more heat to them. Don't even want to get a car from someone that car already has some heat on it too. So it's like, we got to be careful about this. And they luckily run into Dixon. She just came back into town. And so her and Reacher have their exchange. And it's like, right, she knows about Franz, but now she has to be informed about Swan potentially being dead as well. They don't know, but it's very likely. I will once again preface, he was so certain Paul was dead last season. That ended up being the case. But it feels like Swan might end up being an X factor, just the way the episode plays out, that it does seem like he's still going to be the unknown. So it might be kind of a thing of either he's still alive because he's being tortured still, or he's just managed to stay on the run. They were saying he'd never leave his dog to die, so he probably couldn't come back, either because he is dead or he's on the run, or maybe he's already captured, so the others maybe didn't give the information they were supposed to give, and maybe Swan did. Maybe that's why. Well, because they talk about it later on that Orozco and Sanchez's bodies, because of decomposition, they've been dead for a while. So maybe they died before Franz, if that's the case. Because Franz was he left his house for a week and then turned up dead. So who knows how long. And once again, his body might not have even been found if some I think Neely said last episode, some college kids just happened to be hiking in the area or whatever, and ended up someone across the bodies. If it wasn't for them, it wouldn't have been found. And they looked in the same area. Because the sad thing is, even Reacher was saying that on their way to Atlantic City, passing these woods, maybe Swan or Sanchez or Roscoe could be out there. And sadly, they were. They were in the same area of upstate New York that uh, Friends' body was. So, and the fact is, we haven't come across Swan yet. It's kind of the same reason why I kept being like, I don't think Paul is dead last season, because at no point did you ever see his body. Considering all the bodies that were left out on display last season, why wouldn't you have Paul's out and about unless he was alive, or because he was either hiding, or you had him and were using him for a reason. But it turned out, well, in Paul's case last season, he was hiding the entire time. But what if it's the flip side of, well, Swan is being held? Like, he's giving them what they need. So they kind of broke him but couldn't break the others and ended up killing him otherwise. And maybe they worked their way down the list. Or maybe that's why they started killing everyone, because they no longer needed them, because Swan gave them what they want. But as I was talking about before, they did meet up with Dixon, and now she's kind of helped look into this investigation. It says a good old motto of no one messes with the special investigators. And we get a flashback showcasing Dixon and just like her role and kind of what she was very good at. She's the numbers person, and like numbers probably was always like the thing she was really good at, because she kind of handled the more like accounting side of things, and that's kind of what I think that's kind of what she did in the Special Investigators, and she kind of wants to do that now, but she kind of does it a little bit with her current job. But the problem is, she's like, yeah, I don't really like look into like the government stealing money and allocating the money poorly. Rather than it should be like, hey, this money should be allocated to fixing schools, roads, and just helping out the citizens. She's like, my job is basically to stop millionaires from stealing from billionaires. That's all it is. Like, it's just the rich trying to get more rich, rather than everyone else that kind of falls below that curve bell, and trying to like, just kind of like this system being rigged in a lot of capacities. But either way, we learned from the past that Reacher's good old phrase of "it's all in the details" is he got it from her. That's why I think it's so interesting. Like, right, once again, the whole don't mess with the special investigators. You would assume like, oh, maybe that was Reacher. Nope, it was Roscoe. And I keep saying Orozco. I think it's Orozco. Whatever the case may be. It was him. We found that out last episode, and now we find out like the whole saying of it's all in the details. He kept preaching it to Finley last episode, but to be fair, he told Dixon like, "Oh, I'm gonna take that," and you said, she's like, "Yeah, what's mine is yours." But she was also like laying it down pretty, very like, "Oh, you want to go for drinks?" He's like, "No, no, no, no." Like, that's the thing, still unclear. I mean, at the time, it's like, right, it's a little weird. Yeah, we're the same rank, but I'm your boss, so it was a little inappropriate. But the fact of the matter is, it's mainly just, I think, once he has his guard up about people, being around people, being too vulnerable people, he feels like he needs to be strong, and I guess he's just afraid to open up and be vulnerable. It just doesn't come easy to him, It took a little while before he got a little comfortable around Roscoe or Finley, but a little easier with Roscoe, but still. That seemed like such a very specific investigation that Dixon was looking into, because it's like, right, the fuel, it seems like some fuel is going missing, and she pieced it together that, all right, the fuel always seemed to be off or missing after this very specific flight that's like transporting Humvees back to the US or something like that. But then it seems like anytime the planes were dropped off, they still had the exact amount of gas they're supposed to have for the trip. So it's like, what's going on with that gas? So it turns out most likely that, because it is that thing of like, it makes sense, but it always seems so weird to me to think about that. But it's like, yeah, the heavier a vehicle is, the more gas you're spending trying to push it to go. Like, I don't know why that just seems so weird to me. I mean, it makes sense, but at the same time, it also doesn't make sense. It's one of those things of like, you just kind of, it makes sense from like I don't even know if scientific or mathematical, like however approach you want to take it, like it makes sense, but it just seems so weird to think about. That is an interesting detail of, yeah, the heavier something is, the more gas is going to take to make the thing go, because it takes more force and power to push something, the heavier it is. So of course you're going to burn through fuel more and more. But yeah, that's the whole reason. They overfuel to compensate for the fact that it's like, okay, this is what our parameters are supposed to be. We overcompensate with the amount of fuel we're supposed to be using to compensate for the extra heavy stuff. So it's like, oh, maybe they're sneaking stuff in the Humvee, drugs, weapons, yada yada, so on and so forth. So that feels like that could be a potential contender for what's going on present day, especially because they still can't figure out the numbers. Even Dixon can't quite figure them out, because it's like, right, they're not even like reduced fractions. It's like, right, this one says 8 out of 10, so why not just say 4/5, unless it's supposed to be something that's like, yeah, it's actually, and Reacher had suggested, like, what if they're actual just factual numbers of it's, instead of looking for 4/5, we're looking for something that is like, there's literally 8 out of 10 or something. Possibility. And they were also kind of running through like, well, who would have beef with the 110th? And they threw out a name. What was it? James Barr. It's like, nah, that guy's a marksman, so he wouldn't be throwing people out of a helicopter. Plus, I ran into him a year ago in Virginia, and like, yeah, and he now owes me. And I love O'Donnell being like, yeah, I don't even want to know what the hell that was. I'm wondering, is that going to be something we see kind of come up this season or not? They ended up going to a Roscoe. No, I think it was no Sanchez's like office or whatever, because I think they're both. I think Sanchez might have just been a PI or something like that. Maybe both of them were, because they worked together, but I think they worked individually. And I love that when they show up, the place is obviously tossed, but they end up finding a photo, and it's like, yeah, that good old photo. And I love even Reacher going like, am I the only one who doesn't have that photo? And I brought it up last episode. I was like, yeah, he's gonna, because the moment Swan also had it besides Franz, I was like, okay, everyone in that group had it except for him. I'm sure Laurie had it as well. So literally he's the only one that didn't have it. It's like, right, it's kind of hard to have that photo and not have a bookshelf. And you can tell like a lot of that, he's kind of like accepting it. Yeah, that like that's true, but he has this look of almost like he feels, I feel like he won't show it, but he feels regret about it. It's just like my way of going about things is kind of makes me feel like even more an outsider to this group that I was a part of. He feels like, yeah, they all feel so connected, and he, despite putting it together, feels so far away and so distant from it, because he did that on purpose. What his reasoning for it, I don't know. Once again, it's like we got close because we needed each other's backs in these circumstances in the army, but now that we're just like out and about as civilians, I think for him it's just that close proximity. Like, it was life or death. We needed to have each other's back, and we needed to be close. I need to be open. We need to be connected. But now as civilians, we don't really need to. It just, something calls him to kind of have that barrier. And maybe it's just always been there. Maybe to some extent we see that it has been, that he feels the need to be tough. I think it's also interesting too, because it hasn't come up in conversation, because the others later on talk about what they've been up to. We learn about, obviously, continue the continued conversation about the domestication of O'Donnell. We learned that Dixon was engaged, but there was kind of no real love or spark there, because she thought he had cheated on her, and she even admits she was actually relieved when she thought he did, but it turned out it was a message from his nephew. But for her, it's just like, the fact is, I felt some relief meant like it wasn't serious. Like, if I was kind of happy, almost being like, oh, I'm relieved that he cheated on me because it gave me an excuse, without having to like, oh, I don't have to break your heart. Like, I'm not feeling invested in this. I'm not feeling this tug, that spark of lightning. I'm not feeling that real love, So it's like you care about him, but it's like it's not that special something that feeling you should get, and you can tell like it's there between her and Reacher, obviously, but. So she wanted a clean break, but it ended up being more complicated, because it's like, right, she didn't have the excuse she wanted to have to get out of that relationship. It would have been so much easier if he had cheated on her, but now it's like, right, I have to be the one to kind of get messy and break his heart, so. But they go to Reacher, and Reacher kind of dances around stuff. He definitely doesn't bring up the Margrave stuff. Is interesting, because that is something pretty significant in his life, especially considering, hey, that Margrave situation involved your brother being dead. You can kind of see Neely looking at him, because I think for her it's like, it's your business. I'm not going to put your business on blast. If you don't want to share it with the team, I'm not going to push you to share it. But Neely knows about Joe. She was a part of a lot of the Margrave stuff and everything, so she knows not only did he get close to some people like Finley and Roscoe in particular. I guess with all the also with Dixon in the picture again, it's like probably don't want to bring that up, but it's also like right, she lived a life, she had a fiance, and even the whole him and Roscoe thing was like 2 years ago, which is also sad too, because like eventually Roscoe's gonna have to move on, and maybe she probably eventually finds someone and is able to settle down, and maybe she found someone in that 2 years that Reacher never came back. It's that thing of you don't want to have to put your life on pause for someone. You can wait to some extent, but at the same time, it's like, don't put your life on pause for someone that there's no guarantee they'll come back. So who knows for Roscoe? She might have found someone, might be in the process of starting a family, might be too busy to do that right now. Who knows? But she's not going to wait around forever for Reacher, and she shouldn't. So I think it's almost a little reflective in the whole, like, Dixon thing of, like, oh, yeah, she got engaged, but it didn't work out because there was no real spark. But like I said, I just think it's so interesting that like he has this regret of not being there with the group, but he still holds back because he has not brought up the fact is of like, yeah, a lot's happened to me in the time you guys have been away. I mean, who knows, like, did his mom pass while he was still with, I mean, he was wearing his military uniform, so he most likely was still a part of the 110th at the time. He probably got permission to leave duty early just for the sake of being with his mom before she passed. So they probably know about that, whether he really talks about it or not, I don't know. But like the Joe conversation is a fresh thing. It happened in 2 years, and the only person you've been in contact amongst them in that 2 year period was, well, 2+ year period was Neely. So that's where I'm like, I think that's so interesting. And like I said, you see that look on Neely's face. It's like she knows what else he's been up to, helping people and doing other stuff. I mean, he helped stop this whole counterfeiting ring thing. And I'm sure Reacher would more so look at it as like, no, I was just picking up the, where Joe left off. But bringing that up would mean bringing up Joe. So I just think it's so interesting he didn't talk about any of the adventures he had last season. To be fair, lots happened in that 2.5 years. 2.5+ years, and he talks about like, oh yeah, I hitchhike, I do this, sometimes I hop on the train. Like he tries to pretend like everything's okay, but even Dixon asks him like, aren't you lonely? And it's like, he is, but he'd never outwardly admitted. I skipped over it, but they ended up meeting the chief of security, played by Lachlan Monroe, who obviously played Hal Cooper in Riverdale, so there's a comic book connection, but also more specifically the DC comic book connection because he was in Peacemaker along with Robert Patrick. So it's just like, it's so, once again, the connected threads are so interesting. But nevertheless, he wasn't aware of anything that Sanchez and Orozco were working on, and so he was going to ask around other because they were thinking like maybe this has something to do with some gambling scheme, like 65 mil or whatever. Like maybe that's what the 6,500 out of 100K like had to deal with. That's their assumption. So he was looking into that for them. He ended up hooking them up with a suite, which Reacher was like, no, we're good. We can find a hotel. They're like, shut up. Neely in particular was like, shut up. When someone offers you something, you just shut up and you nicely accept it. That's kind of like her perspective on it. So they got a really nice suite. And so obviously Reacher, it's not the, very workaholic night owl, ends up trying to work on those numbers, ends up running into Dixon, who's counting cards essentially. But she's like talking to the guy who was like, oh yeah, here's some concert tickets or whatever. It's like, oh cool, I'm gonna keep playing. He's like, no ma'am, almost like, ma'am, it's not a suggestion, you're counting cards. She's like, yeah, but I'm doing it in my head. So, but because the chief of security, your director of security was kind of like nice enough to hook us up with the suite and everything, I'm gonna cut you a break. So, but her and Reacher went for a walk, and the conversation comes up of why didn't anything happen, and he gave the answer of, yeah, it's just same one he gave Neely about the exact point he made to Neely, and she's like, right, that's such a Reacher response, a well thought out response of like, yeah, because she got a little alcohol in her system, so she's a little brazen with her approach, but also they recognize they're being followed, and it's home dude who followed them from New York is here along with some local help because he knew how much of a beast, because he had reported to Robert Patrick. I love it. He was like, wait, was there a car accident? He was like, no, he hit the car. How does him hitting the car, him kicking the car set off the airbags? Like, he set off the airbags, pull the cop out and beat the ever living shit out of him. I don't know what you want me to tell you. I told you I'm gonna need some backup. He's like, fine, you'll get it. Just make sure he's dead. And none of them walked away. I love that Reacher like literally drowned home dude in semen. Once again, I'm like, you made a mistake of not like double tapping Picard last season. I'm like, are you sure you should be? I was like, well, you dispose of all 3 bodies by dumping them in cement, some wet cement. So it's like, okay, so they're going to be hidden for a while until it'll probably take a little while, but they'll eventually be discovered. But you'll be long gone since then. But obviously, this guy had files on all of them. Because the main ones we saw were Reacher and Dixon's. We saw their photos. But I'm assuming I don't know if it included photos for info on all the team. I'd assume it would. Because I feel like Dixon would have said something once again, I think that plays into the fact is that they're only aware of Franz and potentially Swan being dead. I think that verifies it even more. That because if Dixon was like, oh, he only had 4 files on us, that would mean he already knew the others were dead. And that's where I feel like that falls into place. So that solidifies it even more. That yeah, Robert Patrick's character wants you dead, just not one responsible for actually killing off the squad. But Reacher and Dixon finally do their thing. It's like, right, it's okay to not want to be lonely. Plus, I'm also you're no longer my boss, so we can do our thing. Which I love while they're having sex. It's like that power dynamic keeps flipping because he's on top and then she rolls on top of him, and then you see before it cuts to black him rolling back on. So it's like, yeah, neither one is the submissive type during sex, but I guess it's kind of like a little bit, adds a little spice to the situation by them both flipping back and forth with the roles. So I'd skipped over it, but they did go and visit Sanchez's girlfriend. Was it Melina or Malia? I think Melina maybe. And that led to a whole tussle where Neely and Reacher had to deal with people. Because I know they left Dixon and O'Donnell outside, and it's like, yeah, you guys stay here. You look like cops. And it's like, what do you guys look like? And I love Neely's answer of Lady and the Tramp. But yeah, that he was at the bar, so maybe it wasn't him then. He does have a scar on his face. Maybe he cut his hair or something. Because he was at the bar, and you feel like they would have, because they were like, yeah, some guy was here looking for some information about something that Sanchez has. It's like a guy with a scar. This guy has a scar on his face, and he was at that bar. So I'm like, why didn't they recognize him? I guess they weren't looking for him. But Home Dude was sitting there for a little while, so eventually someone would have went over to him. So is he not the same guy? Maybe he cut his hair so he looked a little different. I feel like they would have because they went out of their way to describe him, and we see later on when he was at the casino when he had turned his face. Like I never noticed the scar until this episode, so I'm like, I'm assuming that's not the same guy. So that's someone, maybe whoever that is tied to the people who actually killed, because they were looking for something very specific. Robert Patrick's character just wants them dead. He's not trying to get anything from them. He wants them all together so that he can kill them. But maybe it's like, well, I want you all dead, so whatever information you have will die with. Well, to be fair, I know what this all deals with, because it deals with AM, because it's also about all the different aliases and the numbers, because we cut to AM, and apparently he's going to be ambushing some kind of truck, and it's like, yeah, all 650 is going to be up there, and it's like, I don't know if that's money or whether that's like, maybe it's a specific thing. Maybe it's some like devices or something. Maybe it's something like electronical, like there's 650 of something. Maybe it is right about the whole, maybe Reacher was right about like, oh, maybe it's 8 out of 10 of like 8 out of 10 of something instead of like, oh, 4/5 of something. Maybe it's more something specific like that. We also learned, because we never gotten the story behind it until this episode about Orozco's tattoo of why his name is there. It's like his sister was not a big fan of him being a part of the military, him dying somewhere unidentified. Maybe some wound will be so grave that he'll be unidentifiable, or maybe his dog tags will get blown away. So he got not only his name tattooed on his back, but also I think his number in the military or something like that. And it was something silly, but it was something he needed to make his sister feel at least a little calmer, because he did it, like, no matter how wild or ridiculous it seemed, he did it because he loved his sister. And now they have to go and tell Sanchez's girlfriend about him, which, to be fair, Reacher already kind of put it out there to, like, wait, shouldn't you talk to Francis about it? It's like, yeah, someone threw him out the helicopter. I love that O'Donnell, Dixon, and Neely all look at him like, what the fuck is wrong with you? It's like he was kind of the bearer of bad news last season, which is so interesting. I guess he'd already done it twice a little bit. It's like, right, you found out your brother was dead, then you also kind of had to break the news to Charlie, so you didn't want to break the news to Jobling's mom and dad. So it's just interesting that I guess this is a little easier to drop that bomb, but everyone was looking like, come on, dude. It's like Reacher sometimes has no tact. Sometimes he can be so tactful, and other times he isn't. Because whatever this is, they had also said that obviously Franz was working with Sanchez and Roscoe, but they also brought up Shaw, so that's why those four in particular were missing. Like, it's like, right, why didn't they come after any of us yet? And that was something that was talked about at the beginning of the episode. Reacher's not the easiest to get to because he's always like wondering. O'Donnell was in the wind because he was, like off grid with his family, like on vacay with his family, so he wasn't someone accessed. Like, the easiest person to get would have been Neely, because even Dixon was undercover, so you really couldn't have gotten to her. So, but they never made a move. Yeah, they searched a room and stuff, but they never like directly made a move. So our quartet now seem to be the only ones left, because everyone else, I mean, once again, Lori died 2 years ago. Like I said, I think last episode Neely was kind of making it sound like it was a car accident, but I don't remember. So, not unless it ends up being a Gray situation. Like, Gray seemed like it was a suicide. Turned out he was murdered. So maybe you'll find out, like, this stretches back even further than they give it credit for. But it seemed like this is a super, super recent thing, considering, like, Franz only died now. And I was like, once again, they've been out of the military for a while. So if they had beef with them, if this was really about the 100 Intent specifically because of some bad blood, why wait till now, all these years later, to come after us? Why, and go about it the way they've gone about it, I mean, as I brought up before, they weren't always the easiest to get on an individual level, so they are all gathered together. I don't know if that was kind of the ultimate plan when I don't think so. It's just like they were getting who they could get to get whatever information they could, and just things have led to over half the group is gone now. So our quartet's all that's left to figure things out. Everyone else is, interestingly enough, all the people that were kind of directly working on something together, still unclear what that was, but it has to do with whatever AM's a part of. And he made that promise that the guy was like, oh no, I never hurt anyone, which we know was BS because he killed the people who helped make his fake papers last episode. And all of a sudden, all these people from this particular special investigators unit are dropping dead. So who this guy is, he's still the big mystery and enigma. What this is all about, we'll ultimately have to wait to see. Still one more episode, so we'll see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.